23. Jayottama. At that time, Sudana the youth continuously and ceaselessly produced the mind of universal great kindness and the mind moistened by great compassion, cultivated merit and wisdom, the two types of adornment, abandoned the filth of all the afflictions, realized the uniform equality of dharmas, kept his mind free of any judgments as to superiority or inferiority, pulled out the thorns of bad actions, destroyed all obstacles, drew strength from the practice of vigor as his city wall and moat, took extremely deep samadhi as his park and gardens, used the sunlight of wisdom to dispel the darkness of ignorance, used the breeze of skillful means to cause the flowers of wisdom to bloom, used unimpeded vows to fill the Dharma realm, and caused his mind to always manifest entry into the city of all knowledge. Continuing his quest for the Bodhisattva path in this way, he gradually traveled along until, reaching the inner precincts of that city, he saw that Jayottama was east of the city at that great adornment banner in the Oshaka, or sorrow-free forest, where he was surrounded by a group of countless merchants and 100,000 laymen, for whom he adjudicated many different kinds of human affairs, on account of which he spoke about the Dharma, and thereby enabled them to forever uproot all conceit, to abandon the concepts of a self and anything belonging to a self, to relinquish whatever they had amassed, to extinguish the filth of miserliness and jealousy, to acquire purity of mind, to become free of the turbidity of the defilements, to gain the power of pure faith, to always delight in seeing the Buddha, to absorb and retain the Buddha's Dharma, to develop the power of the Bodhisattva, to bring forth the Bodhisattva practices, to enter the Bodhisattva samadhis, to acquire the Bodhisattva's wisdom, to abide in the Bodhisattva's right mindfulness, and to increase in the resolute intentions of the Bodhisattva. Having seen that elder teaching the Dharma for that congregation, Sudana the youth then cast his body to the ground as he bowed down in reverence at his feet. After remaining in that prostration for a good while, he rose and addressed him, saying, "O Arya, I am Sudana. I am Sudana. I am solely in search of the Bodhisattva practices. How should a Bodhisattva train in the Bodhisattva practices, and how should he cultivate the Bodhisattva path? When one is following the course of cultivation and training, how can one always be able to teach and liberate all beings? How can one always directly see all Buddhas? How can one always hear the Dharma of all Buddhas? How can one always sustain and preserve all Buddha's Dharma? How can one always enter all Dharma gateways? How can one enter all kshetras and train in the Bodhisattva practices? How can one remain throughout all kalpas, cultivating the Bodhisattva path? How can one know all Tathagata's spiritual powers? How can one receive the protection of all Tathagatas? How can one gain the wisdom of all Tathagatas?" That elder then spoke to Sudana, saying, "It is good indeed, son of good family, that you have been able to resolve to attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Son of good family, I have perfected the Bodhisattva's practice gateway of going everywhere using the independent and effortless powers of the spiritual superknowledges. Son of good family, of what does the Bodhisattva practice gateway of going everywhere consist? Son of good family, taking as my focus all beings of the desire realm in this great trichiliocosm, including all devas of the Triastrimsha heaven, all devas of the Suyama heaven, all devas of the Tushita heaven, all devas of the skillful transformations heaven, all devas of the Parinirmita Vashavartin heaven, and all of the Maradevas, as well as all the others in the realms of the Devas, dragons, yakshas, rakshasas, kumbhandas, gandharvas, asuras, garudas, kimnaras, maharagas, humans and non-humans, including those in villages, encampments, cities, towns, and all other dwelling places. In the midst of all those beings, I teach the Dharma for their sakes, doing so to enable them to abandon what is non-Dharma, to enable them to stop their disputation, to enable them to do away with war, to enable them to halt their angry conflicts, to enable them to break off their grudge-ridden feuding, to enable them to release themselves from the bonds, to enable them to escape their imprisonment, to enable them to avoid terrifying circumstances, to enable them to cut off the killing of beings, and so forth on up to including cutting off the holding of wrong views, to enable them to strictly halt all bad actions and all forbidden endeavors, to enable them to comply with all good dharmas, to enable them to cultivate and train in all the technical skills and arts that benefit the world, to distinguish for their sakes the teachings of the many different kinds of treatises so that they may be gladdened and gradually ripened, and to adapt to the adherents of the non-Buddhist paths and teach them superior wisdom so they may be caused to cut off all their wrong views and enter the Dharma of the Buddha. I also teach the transcendently supreme Dharma even for all the devas of the form realms Brahma heaven. And just as I proceed in this way in all the worlds of this great trichiliocosm, so too do I also do so even for all beings in the worlds of the 10 directions that are as numerous as the atoms in 10 ineffable numbers of hundreds of thousands of kodis of nayudas of Buddha kshetras. For all of them I teach the dharmas of a Buddha, the dharmas of a bodhisattva, the dharmas of a Shravaka disciple, and the dharmas of a Pratyeka Buddha. I teach about the hell realms, teach about the beings in the hell realms, and teach about the paths leading to the hell realms. I teach about the animal realms, teach about the different kinds of animals, teach about the suffering experienced by animals, and teach about the paths leading into the animal realms. I teach about the worlds of King Yama, teach about the sufferings in the worlds of King Yama, and teach about the paths leading into the worlds of King Yama. I teach about the worlds of the Devas, teach about the bliss of the Deva worlds, and teach about the paths leading to the Deva worlds. And I teach about the worlds of humans, teach about the suffering and pleasures of the human worlds, and teach about the paths leading to the human worlds. I do this wishing to reveal the Bodhisattva's meritorious qualities, to cause beings to relinquish the faults of samsara, to cause beings to know and see all the marvelous meritorious qualities of those possessed of all knowledge, wishing to cause beings to know of the delusion and suffering in all the rebirth destinies of existence, to cause beings to know and see the unimpeded dharmas, wishing to reveal the causes of the origination of all worlds, wishing to reveal how nirvana is the most blissful thing in all worlds, to cause beings to relinquish all conceptual attachments, to cause beings to realize the Buddha's non-dependent dharma, to cause beings to forever extinguish the cycle of all afflictions, and to cause beings to be able to turn the Tathagata's wheel of dharma. I teach dharmas such as these for the benefit of beings. Son of good family, I know only this pure dharma gateway of going everywhere to cultivate the bodhisattva practices using the independent and effortless powers of the spiritual superknowledges. As for the bodhisattva mahasattvas, who are completely possessed of sovereign mastery in all the spiritual superknowledges, who are all able to go everywhere to all Buddha kshetras, who have reached the ground of the universal I, who all hear all voices and languages, who have achieved sovereign mastery of the wisdom which everywhere penetrates all dharmas, who are free of any disputation, who are incomparably brave and strong, who use their vast and long tongues to send forth the sound of impartial teachings, whose bodies are marvelously fine and identical to those of the other bodhisattvas, who will ultimately be no different from the Tathagatas, whose wisdom bodies are so vast that they penetrate all 3 periods of time, and whose spheres of objective experience are as boundless as empty space. How could I know of or speak about their meritorious qualities and practices? Son of good family, south of here there is a land known as Shronaparanta. That country has a city known as Kalingavana, in which there is a bhikshuni named Simha Virjambita. You should go there, pay your respects, and ask her, how should the bodhisattva train in the bodhisattva practices, and how should he cultivate the bodhisattva path? Sudan of the youth then bowed down in reverence at his feet and circumambulated him countless times as he gazed up at him in attentive admiration. He then respectfully withdrew and departed.